Здравствуйте.
Добрый день.
У нас тема сегодня посвящена такому интересному, масштабному событию, как велопробег. Какие цели в рамках этого 8-дневного пробега? То есть, в принципе-то в Беларуси это уже велопробеги проходили немного и раньше. Чем, может быть, этот отличается от предыдущих?
So I believe that we shall discuss a very interesting topic for today, which was of a large scale, and this is the bike ride. I would like to ask you about the goals of that 8-day cycling tour that started in end of August and finished in the early September. And we know that in Belarus there have already been bike rides before, so please tell us about the peculiarities of this one and the goals that you had.
So we started this concept of riding to promote the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, last year. And we had about 500-600 people who participated in this event in Naliboksky Pusha in September last year. We called it Bike for SDGs. We decided through that initiative to pay particular attention to certain of those 17 goals. In particular, we wanted to highlight the environmental goals, the need to protect your environment, to ensure that your beautiful nature is preserved. We wanted to promote gender equality. We wanted to promote a barrier-free environment where people with different types of disabilities, or children, could all participate in this bike ride. Of course, another key goal for us was to promote healthy lifestyles, and this is also one of the Sustainable Development Goals. We wanted to promote cycling as a means of transport that is not harmful to the environment. And finally, we wanted to focus on goal number 17, which is about partnerships for development. And so through this initiative, we were able to bring people from very many different countries to Naliboksky Pusha to enjoy a wonderful day of riding bicycles, but also learning about your country and learning about these Sustainable Development Goals. The event was so successful that many people thought that we should continue it, and I personally felt that perhaps it was one of those initiatives that we should continue every year until the year 2030, which is, of course, when the agenda for the Sustainable Development Goals ends. And at the same time, I thought, wouldn't it be a great idea if you could do it in different places around your country, so that all of these international partners that we attract to this event can also see different parts of your country and enjoy the different aspects of your nature. So this year, we agreed with the governor of Grodno that we would do it in this beautiful area around the Off-Gustav Canal, and that we would combine this Bike for SDGs second year in a row with the existing Off-Gustav Canal festival, which also happens every year in September. So this year again, we had about, I think, 500 or so people from more than 20 countries participating in this one-day bike ride on the 26th of August. And once again, for me, what was very important was that it was a ride which could be done by people with different types of disabilities. And so we had a number of people, from children to older people with different types of disabilities, who participated in this. At the same time, I thought maybe this year we could do something different as well. I think you know, Elena, that I have been someone for, in the 5 years that I've been in Belarus, tried very hard to support your country in promoting and respecting and fulfilling the rights of people with different types of disabilities. And I'm very happy that the country signed and then last year ratified the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. We have also developed a national action plan to implement this convention. And already the country has taken several steps in amending legislation, regulations, in providing services for people with different types of disabilities. But of course, there's a lot more to be done. And in particular, I think there's quite a lot to be done in terms of trying to help people who don't have disabilities to understand those who do have disabilities, and to fight those stereotypes and stigma and fear that many people in Belarus and around the world still have with respect to people with disabilities. And this is especially challenging when it comes to people with mental disabilities or mental illness. People are afraid and really don't know how to deal with people who have mental disabilities or mental illness, and so they just prefer not to notice them at all. And so I thought that, we would make use of this Bike for SDGs event, annual event, as a starting point to ride through the oblasts of Grodno and Minsk, from Grodno city to come to Minsk over an 8-day period, covering more than 400 kilometers, because we didn't come through M6. We took all these back roads and forest roads and village roads, not just to ride a bicycle throughout that period, but to also meet people who were either themselves dealing with mental disability or were providing services to those who were dealing with mental disability or mental illness, or were families of those who were dealing with these types of challenges. So more than 400 people at different times rode this during these 8 days. I and a few other of my colleagues rode pretty much the entire distance. There were people with different types of disabilities who rode quite a lot of that distance, and my good friend Sasha Abdevich, who is in a wheelchair, actually did the entire distance with me. We had elderly people, children. The youngest was actually 1.5 years old. And we had ambassadors, mayors of cities, people from 7 or 8 different countries, riding from Grodno to Navaruda, from Navaruda to Skidale, Skidale to Shuchin. We went to Lida, from Lida we went to Ashmiane, Smorgon. We also then went to Evia to Volozhin to Zaslav, and then to Minsk last Sunday. We visited many homes. We were invited to speak with families who had people living with different types of mental disabilities. I was very moved by the hospitality and the sincerity with which they welcomed us. I was extremely saddened at times by some of the problems and challenges that they were dealing with. And I was inspired and encouraged often by how many of them had found ways to overcome those incredibly difficult challenges. I met people and talked with people, played with people who had Down syndrome, autism, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, imbecility, schizophrenia, people who are bipolar, so many different types of ailments. But one of the things that we all notice was, no matter what kind of mental disability people are facing, if you would take the time and have the patience to understand them, they all had beautiful minds. And that's why we call this initiative over this 8-day period Mind Over Matter, because what we feel is that no matter what your body might be like, if we focus on our minds, if we understand each other's minds, we will actually create a better world for all of us. So that's a long answer to a short question.
Я так понимаю, что происходило общение с представителями власти. Может быть, где-то обсуждали, поняли, чего этим людям не хватает. То есть какие-то, может быть, шаги необходимо будет принять. То есть, так скажем, логическое дальше продолжение велопробега.
So, as I understand, you've met people, you've spoken to people, and as I understand, you've also you have been speaking to the people from the government. And I'm wondering whether this bike ride is not abandoned, because it should have logical continuation for this subject not to be abandoned, but to be followed up by some additional efforts and measures aimed at these people.
Absolutely. So one of the things that, of course, will come out of this, we hope, and not we hope, we plan, is that, the individual cases that we have had an opportunity to see and hear about and experience, there are some very specific responses that can be made. There are specific types of support or services that can be provided. And so one of the things for sure is that we would try to bring that kind of assistance or support to those very specific families or cases that we discovered along the route. And then there were a number of projects that we developed, ideas that we developed as we were writing, because there are people from business, from the diplomatic community, from NGOs, from the government, and of course the UN. And of course, one of the beautiful things about riding a bicycle is that you can have 100 people cycling, and you can talk to different people along the way as you're riding, and you can actually have a meeting of the minds and have agreements made. And so a lot of those things, those ideas were developed over those 8-day periods, and I look forward to actually implementing some of those projects in the coming weeks. And at the same time, we actually launched some concrete projects along the way. For example, in Lida, the Polish ambassador and I announced the construction of a 10-kilometer barrier-free bicycle path for people, wheelchairs and other kinds of disabilities, as well as, of course, regular people. And during this initiative as well, there was another embassy that had some finances that they had available, that they were willing to help refurbish and rehabilitate a building for children, for kindergarten for kids with disabilities. And we put all the dots together, and with the Ministry of Labour and Social Protection, the Grodno authorities, now that project will go ahead as well. At the same time, there are more systemic issues that we need to be addressing, and as a result of having heard these stories and experienced what we did, there are a number of areas that I would like to focus the work of the UN moving forward in Belarus. Some of this is already reflected in your National Action Plan, as I mentioned before. Some of it, I think, can be added or modified in the National Action Plan. So I think one of the areas for our support, which I would really like to increase, is to look at how we can provide the best knowledge and experience available out there from around the world to those who provide services to people with mental disabilities, whether they are social workers or teachers or parents or healthcare workers. I think some of these mental disabilities we're only discovering now how to actually respond to them, how to diagnose them first of all, and then how to respond. And even in Western countries, it doesn't always exist. So we need to be able to find the best knowledge and experience with respect to very specific types of mental disabilities, and try to bring it here to Belarus so that the people who are working in this sector actually have the tools. Because I think, from the most part, what I saw was that they have the commitment and the passion and the determination, but they don't always have the tools. And for this we have to work very closely with 3 ministries at least, because the Ministry of Health takes care of those kids who have disabilities of this kind until the age of 3. Then it's the Ministry of Education, and after 18 it's the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection. So we need to, of course, make sure there's better coordination between these 3 ministries, but also that we as an international community are able to provide support through these ministries and the institutions that they're responsible for individuals from the first day onwards, right through their entire lives. Then I think that we need to work on some of the legislation. We've done quite a lot. You have done this in Belarus, but there are still some laws that need to be changed or modified in order to really truly make it barrier-free. And so right now I am working with the presidential administration, the Minister of Justice, and other legal institutions, along with the European Union and other countries like Germany, UK, to develop a comprehensive rule of law and access to justice program. And this is going to be one key area that we will focus on, is to ensure that the laws of this country are completely compliant with the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities and creates a barrier-free environment, especially with respect to people with mental disabilities, but of course not only. Thirdly, I think there is a very serious challenge when it comes to dealing with people who have certain types of disabilities, mental disabilities in particular, after the age of 18. So there appears to be a fairly good program of support for kids, at least until the 9th year. But then especially after the age of 18, for in some towns, we found it's quite challenging, and families send these kids to the correctional center, which is there, in practically every district, but they don't necessarily the correctional centers are good places, good people working there, and when these kids go there, they feel much better. But I think that if we can find, in some cases, clearly not all, a way for these young people to be employed in some form or the other, they would have more meaningful, fulfilling lives than simply going to the correctional center for 2-3 hours to make some handicraft and go back home. And we have some success stories, not a lot, but we do have some success stories in Belarus where people with Down syndrome or autism or cerebral palsy have been employed. And so this is why it was also important to have CEOs of companies riding along with us, because I think it's not just the government. In this case, we've got to work very closely with the private sector. And finally, I think the media, can do a lot more to enlighten people, to dismantle the stereotypes and erase the fears that other people who don't have disabilities still have in this country. And so I am very keen to, first of all, we are working with the Ministry of Information to develop some sort of a information strategy on how to report on the issues of disability generally, including mental disability. But also I'm very keen to work directly with journalists like you, to to train others, especially those in the different regions, to join this collective cause of creating a barrier-free society by fighting the stigma that is attached to mental disability and mental illness. So you can see, riding a bicycle was the easy part. Now the real work begins, right?
Все-таки, возвращаясь к целям устойчивого развития, можно говорить о том, что вот этот велопробег, он преследовал, ну, как минимум, я так понимаю, наверное, 2, а может даже и больше, то есть, наверное, о равных возможностях, и в то же время мы не забываем все-таки, что это был велосипед, это 8 дней. Сколько же сэкономили-то выбросов в окружающую среду, сколько не выбросили.
And I would like to get back to the agenda of the SDGs, because you had that biking tour, and I believe that you followed at least 2 goals. First of all, you created equal opportunities for all, and second, you have been biking for 8 days, which means that you considerably reduced the pollution of the air.
And I reduced a lot of weight too. No, you're absolutely right. It was certainly for me, the main focus was on inclusion and creating a more equal society. We also wanted to focus on sustainable tourism, and we wanted to focus on how we can promote healthier lifestyles, especially in some of these smaller towns. Because there are challenges around alcoholism, around the lack of a proper diet or exercise, and aging communities. So, yes, there were multiple sustainable development goals that we were promoting and focusing on during this long bike ride. And so one of the things we did was to visit the peatlands in near Navagruda, where the UNDP has had a project for some time to re-wet the peatlands, to protect your peatlands, amongst other things, to protect the biodiversity of such wetlands, to prevent fires, which are very hazardous and historically have been very damaging to the environment of your country, to reduce CO2 emissions, because when peat is extracted and it becomes dry, these wetlands cease to have the capacity to absorb carbon dioxide like they used to. So a large number of hectares have been restored through this UNDP project, and one of the things I did was to open an ecological center where people can come and learn about the importance of your peatlands, your wetlands in Navagruda. And then in Naliboksky Pusha in the Volozhin district, during the bike ride along with the European Union, we opened a beautiful bird watching center where I hope children from Minsk and the region would be able to go, not only children of course, and it's also a barrier-free approach, so people with disabilities can also enjoy this place and appreciate the natural resources, the fauna and flora that you have, and in the same time ensure that the local community is able to derive economic benefits from this kind of tourism. We visited 7 or 8 churches, Orthodox as well as Catholic. We visited a mosque along the way. We visited a number of old historical buildings from the nobles of Lithuania mostly, but we also had the pleasure of leading a little bit of a village life. I was digging up potatoes with a lady called Baba Lucia, and I was learning to drive a Belarusian tractor with a guy called Dmitry. But through all of that, I guess we, of course, saw many lakes and forests and rode through cornfields. And through all of that, I felt that there was a lot that can still be done to promote ecotourism in Belarus. And Grodno is a great place to start as a region. And then in the next few weeks, we will launch a competition. It's for a project called BelMed. It's an EU project which is being implemented by a number of UN agencies. And this is a competition that will award different grants to organizations that promote healthy lifestyles in the Grodno region.
А вот личные впечатления, вот от проезда на велосипеде, вот с точки зрения вот велотуриста, все-таки очень большой путь. Были ли какие-то сложности? То есть вот в этом направлении есть еще в Беларуси над чем работать? Тоже ж инфраструктура и возможность проехать.
And I would like to get your personal impression on the biking itself, because you were a biking tourist, you had a long way, probably you faced some difficulties, maybe you see some things to be improved in terms of infrastructure, roadside services. What were the difficulties on the way?
Well, I think I was probably not your typical biking tourist, because I had fantastic support. My team and I had amazing support from all of the different local authorities and the governor of Grodno in particular. You know, in sections where we had to use, we never used the highway, but we still had to use some main roads, and we had some support from the local police, the ambulance. So in a sense, you know, I think I was not dealing with some of the challenges perhaps some other cyclists may have had to face. But I was riding with friends of mine who were who were part of the team from the Minsk Bicycle Society and also Grodno, and we've in fact had even a couple of cyclists who biked all the way from Germany to join this 8-day tour. And so, of course, as regular cyclists, I was discussing with them what can be improved. I think one of the things, first of all, is we have to have better information. We have to have information about routes, about the surfaces, about places to see and things to do, and spots where there are certain types of accommodation or cafes. And if we can have these kinds of information in one place, so anybody who is interested in being a cycling tourist can go on the internet and say, all right, I want to go from the Polish border to Minsk on a bicycle. What are my options through Brest or through Grodno? And what is there to see? What is the support I can get? So information is very important. And secondly, I think it's important to have bicycle lanes. You know, part of our ride was on the Eurovela road, and that's a route in Minsk Oblast, a route that's been mapped out by cyclists. But I think if you could do this for other routes along across the country, where if there are sections where you have to take a regular road, then you actually create a bike path as well for the sake of safety. Thirdly, I think there's more we can do with some of these farmsteads. There are a lot of them, and seriously, I think it doesn't take very much to upgrade them a bit, to help them develop some skills, maybe some marketing strategies, and of course, I think we need to also work on language so that, you know, people are able to communicate with tourists in English primarily, but perhaps also Polish and German. But certainly, I think Belarus has a lot it can offer if it gets some of these things right. And finally, you know, this 5-day visa-free regime in Grodno is really showing very, very positive results. I've looked at the numbers with the governor and others, and the Minister of Sports and Tourism was riding a bicycle with me as well on the first day of Gustav Canal. And I'm very glad. I understand that period is going to be extended possibly to 10 days very soon. And if that is the case, then that means that people who come will want to go beyond Grodno city and perhaps explore Grodno Oblast, or maybe even go into the Brest Oblast. And that means, I think, that we've got to be able to find ways to invest in restoring some of your historical sites, because I found some beautiful old buildings which really desperately need some renovation, reconstruction. And sometimes, local communities, with the help of local authorities, were able to patch it up. But if you start attracting more and more tourists with this expansion of the visa-free regime, then maybe it's also possible to find investors.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity.